In this episode of Talking Taboos, the podcast, we're joined by Kit Green, an artist working across theatre, music, experiential performance, comedy and cabaret. Kit talks about her immersive theatre piece Prurience, where she placed audiences inside a fictional self-help group for people struggling with porn addiction. The piece challenged people to confront their assumptions about addiction and the idea that struggling with porn only happens to other people. We discuss the discomfort and judgement that surface during performances, and why humour, entertainment and immersive storytelling can help people engage and talk about uncomfortable or taboo subjects more openly. Please note that this episode includes discussions of addiction, sexual violence and mental health. Please listen with care. Each year we do this research project called Today's Taboos to kind of pull out the topics of the year that people feel are the most urgent taboos. So the things that are impacting people's lives, impacting more lives than we suspect. So this year, the two topics that came out of that piece were addiction to porn and sexual assault by someone you know. We're taking each of those topics in turn and doing a deep dive into them to see what we can learn from people who've been through it, from people who are working in that space, creating, expressing in that space. So when it comes to the addicted to porn topic, we've been speaking to people who've been through it. We're speaking to clinicians. And I really wanted to speak to people who are, talking about taboo topics through their creative expression. And so when I came across your play, I literally couldn't believe it. Because was it about 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago?
It's a long time ago, yeah. And I'm really, really proud of the piece. We'll talk a lot more about it, I'm sure. But I'm really proud that it felt like an outlier when I first proposed this piece. I felt a little bit weird about it, and people's reaction. Again, we can talk about this. Was quite. People made jokes. People were sort of. I come from a comedy background. I think they thought I was, joking about it, and. Yeah, it was a real struggle to get people to take it seriously as a piece of work, and I think it's not often I'm arrogant enough to say I was ahead of the curve, but I really, I really was. It's a while ago now, and yeah. So, but I'm so sad that that things have got so much worse, and in a way, of course, they have, and they will continue to, and we all are going to need to develop much more robust strategies for dealing with these everyday temptations, if you like, and because they're designed to get us addicted, and we just don't have the defenses.
I have so many questions to ask you about.
Yeah.
But before that, it might be useful for anyone who's watching or listening to this, if you could just sum it up. What was the play about? What was it like? If I had the opportunity to come and see it was it 2017? I think it was.
2017 in London, 2018 in New York. Yeah.
What would I have experienced? What was it all about?
Well, yeah, and experience is a good word. So I make, and at that point I was really, really 100% focused on making immersive or experiential theatre where the audience join in. And so I'd done a whole range of shows like that, including a show called Office Party, where you pretend to be part of at the annual office party. So it's low-level immersive role-playing. That was a pure entertainment show with serious intent. So that's just one. I did a show called VIP, where you'd have to compete to get into the VIP party. So I'm really interested in entertainment. I'm interested in immersive experiences that are fun but dealing with serious issues. And I was invited to be part of to do some work or make work at the National Theatre Studio, where the National Theatre support artists to make new work. And they said to me, "What do you want to make?" And I said, I want to make an immersive piece about porn addiction. And they were like, okay. I mean, literally it was like that. And I was like, no, I'm serious. And I said also, I mean, this is a bit technical theatrically, I want to do a piece that's fully scripted and fully improvised, which of course sounds like a massive contradiction, but that was a very technical aim. And actually that's what I did. So we did it at the South Bank Centre in London. It was advertised as a play about self-help group for people who are addicted to porn. That's what the marketing was. What people didn't know is that when they turn up, they'd come to an empty meeting room. And they sort of wait outside. So like around 200 people capacity. They wait awkwardly outside, and then the group leader, who in these cases was me, would turn up a little bit late, a little bit stressed, and like, "Hi everyone, here we are, ready for the support group. And can you come into the room?" I would unlock the room. It's all very very
Love
detailed.
it.
And then it'd be like, right, the regulars know what to do. If it's your first time, just ask someone, put out the chairs, help set up the tea and coffee, get the biscuits out. So just like a self-help group. And then the chairs are arranged in 2 concentric circles. Everyone sits down. Of course, the audience, who are the majority of people, are like, what the hell is going on? And then the meeting unfolds like a regular 12-step group. We can come to 12-step in a second. It basically, the meeting unfolds. Some people seem to know what they're doing. Most people absolutely don't. But then there's cards with text on that some people are asked to read. So they're just reading and whatever. And basically, you don't know who's an actor and who's a fellow audience member. It's obvious that I'm an actor, the group leader's an actor, but everybody else can be, you don't know. And that is sort of at the heart of the piece. And theatrically, and there are various tricks that unfold about who's acting, who's not, what's real, what's not. And of course, I'm always interested in relating form to content, and that's because one of the insidious things that porn does is elide the relationship between truth and fantasy. And getting into fantasy as an addict is very corrosive. It's very dangerous because we bring that into our lives. So we might think, oh, I just watched this on a screen and I know that's not real, but I can just play with it. But then we're objectifying people in the street the next day. We are bringing those intense sexual fantasies into our real lives, into our workplace, into our families. All of this corrosive stuff, and it becomes incredibly dangerous. So the elision between truth and fiction is at the heart of the piece. And why make it immersive? Well, because I could easily, and people at the National Theatre were saying, right, this is a play, this would be fascinating. And I'm like, I don't want 500 people sitting in the dark watching actors playing people who have a problem, because we all have a problem. Whether or not we're addicted to porn is irrelevant. Whether or not we're addicted to sex is irrelevant. Whether or not we're addicted to food is irrelevant. We all, because we're alive right now, have a problem with porn. If it's not us, it's our partner, it's our children, it's our parents, it's our siblings, it's our friends. There are so many people who are struggling to deal with this. And I don't want this kind of fourth wall comfort of sitting going, oh, isn't it sad for these poor, sad people who have a problem with porn? We all have a problem with porn.
So you actually removed that us versus them mentality that people can sit in and got rid of that barrier by doing this.
By them literally being in a self-help group that they didn't sign up for. And people, I mean, I don't think I made a lot of shows and I've had, a lot of impactful shows, I will be immodest enough to say. But I think this was the one that really kind of challenged people perhaps the most, because they sort of like, you can see them like going, this is horrible. I don't want to be part of this. I'm not like some perv, dirty perv. And then within like half an hour, they're going, oh.
You saw the judgment from people early on and not wanting to be associated with that situation they were being put in.
Well, as you just said, they wanted to other it. They wanted to say this is what happens to other people, not what happens to people like me, nice people like me. And as I'm saying, I'm not branding everyone a porn addict or a sex addict by any means, but it's something we all need to be aware of. And I think the mechanism is so similar for the problem that we all definitely do have, which is addiction to Instagram, to Vinted. This is a problem because it was designed to be a problem. It's not because you and me are weak-willed and just like looking at, cos dresses online or whatever we're doing. It's because it was designed to be a problem.
You're looking at the absolute bigger picture here of like the digital world and how it plays to like the attention economy. With this play, what was it about the topic of being addicted to porn that piqued your, curiosity? Why that topic?
I think I'm very interested in 12-step across the board from, all the different fellowships. And I wanted to explore that. It's inherently very theatrical. And so I was sort of interested in that. And then it was like, well, which kind? And there isn't Porn Addicts Anonymous. Just in case people don't know, there is Sex Addicts Anonymous, so SAA, and there's Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, SLA. So they're very adjacent, obviously. And I didn't want to write about either of those because they exist and they're so important and they're so powerful. I wanted to sort of refine the focus a little bit, and it seemed to me that porn addiction really did sort of refine the focus and also then connected, as we've just said, to all the digital realm. So that's why I wanted to. I don't, and maybe because I mean, I have many problems with addiction, which is why I'm interested in writing about 12-step. I think I can hold my hand up and say, I don't think porn is really one of my issues. I am very aware of it, and I certainly, I'm not saying I never have looked at porn. I've not overdosed on porn at times in my life. I definitely wouldn't take that kind of like, oh, no, I'm just an academic exploring this. It's not one of my core addictions, so I think that gave me a little bit of distance, but it's adjacent to some of my core problems. So again, it just made it slightly easier for me to look at. It was also something that I felt back then I hadn't seen anyone making work about. So again, with my sort of like theatrical brain, it was like, okay, I can sort of slightly isolate this issue. There was a bit of a moral panic at the time about young men and porn addiction, which is still happening now. But right back then, I think it was definitely sort of in the air that it was specifically young men and porn addiction. And I was interested in that because it seemed to me that there's been successive waves of things, of moral panics about young men and sex. So in the Victorian period, it was like masturbation will kill you and make your palms hairy or, whatever. And then in, I don't know, the post-war period, it was like you should save your robustness and your sort of vitality for marriage or whatever. But there's always successive waves of and it's to do with the fear of masculinity, the worries about masculinity, that it's somehow both a huge problem, but also somehow it's a problem because it's being diminished. So, we need this kind of masculine virility in order to kind of keep the species going, but also it's a massive problem and men are all, hugely problematic. So there's this huge tension about that. And so I think that was also part of it.
There must have been, I mean, I'm assuming there was a period where you did your own deep dive into this of research, whilst you were putting this together and writing it. What did that entail? What did it reveal to you? What did you learn? Because as you said, you were very ahead of the curve in bringing this to the public. So how was it doing that research?
Yeah, I went to 12-step meetings to the two groups that I've mentioned. I should say at this point, actually, in parentheses, because it's super important, I didn't so the play was called Prurience, which sometimes people don't know what the word means, but just in case anyone doesn't, is like sort of like excessive interest in sexual matters. And I didn't. This is not 12 Step. It's a private company called Prurience, and they're started in America by a former porn star turned therapist, Amelia Atkins, and it's aggressively capitalist, and it's a little bit culty, and it sort of nicks everything good from 12 Step and then reframes it through a capitalist lens, because also one of the other focuses of the play is aggressive capitalism, and this notion that porn is business and is huge business, and so Prurience is basically using this point I make in the piece, is basically using the thing that got us addicted, got us into this problem, which is aggressive late stage capitalism, as a technique to solve the problem that it has created. And I think I can't remember the exact quote, but it's very famous, which is you can't solve a problem with the same tools that created it in the first place. So I was making that point. So it's really important to me that I am not in any way critiquing 12 Step. I love 12 Step. I think it's life-saving. It's life-changing for so many people. So yes, I went to those meetings. I found a couple of sex therapists who were offering treatment for porn addiction. And I spoke to a documentary filmmaker who had made a program for Channel 4, which was about porn addiction. And I think that's where actually the name Prurience came, because I felt that documentary, it was very useful to talk to the presenter and the research team, but I also felt that they were a bit prurient. They were a bit sort of like, this is sort of a bit titillating. It's mainstream telly. I mean, it's not Channel 5, but yeah. So I just felt that even that was like, potentially helpful. It was certainly eye-opening, but it was a bit yucky. And so yes, I think that's probably the research that I did, and I did lots of research into app creation at the time, because people weren't really talking about dopamine hits and the way that they're built into, the way that still on Amazon you put something in your, you put some moth repellent in your basket and it goes bing, and you're like, someone loves me, and you're like, no, it's just you putting something boring into your basket. So that's a little dopamine hit. So yeah, I did some research into that, which has become a huge part of my work, really, and I love this digital work. And it might be relevant to say I've just started a fellowship, an academic fellowship in Oxford, and it's the Centre for Ethics in AI. So it's a relatively new centre, University of Oxford at the Schwarzman Centre, and I'm one of their new fellows, looking at AI and what are the ethics? How is it all going to impact us? And that's a direct result of this stuff. I mean, like, AI is just a development of all the stuff we're talking about, and porn will be AI generated more than it is already, and we will all have to be a billion times more resilient than we are at the moment. Well, it's people are often amazed when you like point out how some of the great technological advances of this last 50 years are all directly connected to porn. Development of VHS tapes, streaming is so intimately connected with porn, webcams. We wouldn't be using this kind of technology had it not been first used for live chats and that kind of like mutual masturbation sites 20 years ago. Technology is so intimately connected with the sex industry and porn, and will continue to be. So yeah, this stuff is not just a tiny little kind of locked away part of human experience. It impacts everything, and we can, as I said, people can ignore it and go, this doesn't affect my life. It does.
And that's what you were trying to do with that play, is sort of bring a little bit of confrontation to the audience. I'm curious to know more about how people responded to, because I suppose it is a confrontation, really, in a way. What different reactions did you see from the audience? I'm really curious, and particularly anything that you noticed that just highlighted that, yeah, there is stigma around this. This is still very taboo. What did you see in the
Oh my
audience?
God, it's such a good question, and a billion. No, that's not true. A lot of examples come to mind, so I'll
Let's get
try
into
and
it.
kind of keep it. Yeah, um, I mean, what I was doing was trying to confront them, to use your word, in a variety of ways. So some was absolutely about sexual content. And so there was a young male actor, young man of color actually, who felt very, very isolated and had no one to talk to. And it was sort of partly his age and his vulnerability, but partly cultural and his, family and all of these things. And that really did reflect some of the research I've done. Like, he was in absolute despair because he was 19 and wasn't getting any work done, just couldn't concentrate, was just like felt he was breaking himself. And that really shocked people at the sort of like huge waves of empathy towards him. There was a middle-aged female character who incredibly respectable, and people were so shocked by her story that that she's like watching gay male porn actually was her thing, and people were like, no one does that, and you're like, well, yeah. So part of it is yeah, absolutely, and part of it was the theatrical, the stories, the storytelling, the human kind of connection. Part of it was there was an older man who sort of like almost represented the patriarchy, the kind of all the unpleasant stuff, like really and he sort of builds up to this tirade of kind of rejection of the process and just was just talking absolute filth, and it was really and so there's that. So that those are the kind of obvious ways of challenging people. But then I think the more subtle ways were the theatrical ways I talked about, which is like what's real, what's not, to remind us that this is what porn does. So that there's that, and then there's a whole meta theatrical section which I won't give away because I really want to redo this piece. And this is when people are like going, what, and several reviewers, I think 3 or 4 reviewers, like the reviewer from the Times, the Telegraph, they said the same thing. Lots of people said the same thing, which is like, I thought I was the only person who wasn't an actor in a room of 200 people. And so it really questions what is reality. So so there's that. So but you asked about reactions. So people responded a lot to that because it's much safer to say I don't know who's an actor and what's real and what's not than it is to say I find this character disgusting, or I find this really profoundly shocking, or I'm riddled with prejudice about what a porn addict looks like. It's quite hard to talk about that stuff, but it's much easier to talk about the kind of surface theatricality. Gosh, I think I think people. So there were easy ways of people contributing. So, for example, at the beginning, the first thing that the group leader does is says, we always start every session with what was our first experience of porn. And then I should say that the actors, there were 10 actors, and they would speak if no member of the public spoke. So it was always this, as I said before, it's fully scripted and it's fully immersive. So there was lots of asking contributions. And so the first couple that the actors would say were very light and fluffy and often our first experience of porn can be. And so then people would contribute these stories. And so many times we all in the room would be like, you're saying this out loud. Like, some of them were really, really shocking, but people would present them as, isn't this fun? I discovered that my dad liked this kind of niche porn by finding it in his wardrobe. And you go, oh my God, girl, that's like 14 years in therapy. What are you talking about? That you're presenting this as fun. So there were quite a few shocking things that people said. And then also, yeah, I think it was judgment more than anything, like where people would, because it's a piece of theatre, and that's the suspension of the disbelief. So the characters would say things, and they would literally go, "Ooh," or, and you're like, "Wow, you just did that out loud," you know?
Was there anything, when you were pitching this, developing this, what about reactions from the industry?
Lots of people were very supportive, and they once they saw it, they realized, look, I don't always make good work, look, by any means, but this was clearly good work. Do you know what I mean? I always say, if you're not having failures, you're not taking risks. So, and I've definitely had
Couldn't
failures.
agree more.
Yeah. But this definitely worked. So I would say that once people saw it, they got what I was doing. But when I would describe it, and I say it's an immersive piece about porn addiction, people would sometimes, like very high up people in these big organizations I have named previously. So if you can't remember what they are, rewind them. I will not repeat them here. But, but I have said who they are. They should know better. They would sort of like go, "Oh, such fun," or "That sounds like a hoot," and I'm like, "Why?" And then actually, no, I am still angry about this. And the person's not working there anymore. But the person that was very high up at the National Theatre studio, they would get everyone together regularly, all the creatives or the people developing pieces. And they basically said, it was whatever, October. And they said, "Hey, Kit's doing this piece about porn addiction. We really want them to do it for the Christmas party." And I was like, "What?" And in front of everyone. And you know that thing where you're like, the easy thing to do is to just go, "Oh yeah, okay," and just let it go. And then I just was so profoundly shocked. I was like, "Have you," like, I hadn't made anything then, I hadn't done any sharings, but I had written some proposals. And I said, "Have you," "No, no, 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 I'm not letting this go. Have you read what I've written? This is like destroying people's lives. This is, I'm not making, yes, I come from a cabaret background, but I've got a long history of making serious work as well." And like, what? Like, why is this funny? So, yeah.
Seems to be the default, or something that's an easy response for people to have, I suppose, is to make light of it, to not really consider just how, serious it could be and how it does affect people. They're not making that jump themselves. And I suppose that's what was so great about your play, is that
Oh,
it helped
thank you.
them connect that and bridge that gap.
Yes, it's entertaining, absolutely, but it's not trivial. And so I think, yeah, I love your question. Like, what was the industry response? I think they thought it would be, this is why I chose the word, even though it's not a word people really kind of understand or relate to necessarily, that there's prurient interest in it. It's like, ooh, it's sex. Ooh, it's a bit dirty. Ooh, it's a bit titillating. And when it's not, it's insidious. It's digital infection, and yeah. So I was hugely disappointed uh, in several people's responses to that. And then later on, when it had gone to New York and it was a success, it was then there was many people sort of wanted it, and they were. And I basically just got sick of being in meetings where they would say, "We want to change the marketing. We want to just lighten the tone because we think it's going to put people off." We don't want to use the word addiction in the copy. We don't want it to seem like it's going to be really problematic for people to come. We want to entice them in and then let the piece do the work. And I was like, bullshit! Like, come on! This is what it's about. And if I don't want people to come if they can't sit with the words porn addiction.
Yeah.
And
Well, you've got a duty
I,
of care for them to know, right, before they come.
I think there's a duty of care. I think you're absolutely right. And yeah, but also, like, I don't- I also, there's a duty of care by not sort of going, "Well, this will be a fun evening out." like it will challenge you and it will stimulate you intellectually and it will make you think about your beliefs. And yeah, there are some great laughs in it, but it's not, let's not, it's not going to say kinky boots. Do you know what I mean? It's so I sort of got a bit tired of that. And that's why I'm very good at letting go of pieces. But as I say, I think it's due for a renaissance or a restaging because it's now much more urgent and it's being talked about much more now, and people like you are doing good work around it, and that was so interesting that came from asking people what issues did they want talked about.
We've heard that it's something, those who are struggling with it don't want to tell anyone about it. They're struggling alone, they're feeling isolated. Why do you think that silence still exists? It's been almost 10 years since you've done the play. Why do
Yeah,
you think it's still so persistent and keeping people isolated?
I think addiction is linked to shame. All addictions, whatever they are, we know that. So that's one factor. The fact that it's sex, and sex is rightly, very rightly, private and personal and very closed off, and from to some extent, we should keep it as this sacred thing that is ours. Whilst being able to discuss it and talk with our friends, talk with people, but yes, it should be private. So I think that correlation of those two things, but also the sheer, and this is not original at all, but the sheer ubiquity of it, and the as we've said, the digital advances just mean it's so hard to turn your face away from it if you decide that you need to, if you're finding it a problem.
And for those exact reasons that you've just said, they especially don't want to talk to friends and family. That's particularly hard. It's easier to talk to strangers. I'm curious to know what you think creative spaces like your immersive piece, how do they, because it seems like from what you've said, they make it a little bit easier for people to engage in a topic like being addicted to porn and also talk about it. What is it about that creative space? What's it doing?
In my case, I think it's introducing the idea to people that obviously they're interested enough to come to a piece about porn addiction and addiction in general. So they're already, moving towards it, but they're not. It's not their primary problem. They're not kind of like, oh my God, I'm going. Actually, although some people did, they were coming for therapy. But yeah, I think it's just widening that circle. And as we've said, lots of people said to me or emailed me afterwards and were like, I've realized that my boyfriend's addicted to porn. I had no idea. So it's just like opening out and othering. And as we've said, half jokingly, half seriously, we're all addicted to something. It's on my mind, so I'm going to pull us back. So before I forget, somebody saw it in London who programs the Guggenheim Gallery in New York. So I'm sure you read about this. So this is like super fancy. So the Guggenheim Gallery in New York had never commissioned a piece of theatre, and they commissioned the American production of this. But the thing that was really astonishing is the cultural differences. In America, they're talking about it. People would say, yeah, I used to worry if I had a problem with this, but I talked about it with my therapist and we worked on it for a couple of sessions and then I think I'm fine. Like we don't have, it made me really reflect that it's just not, of course, we have therapy, we have different things. And if your friend's struggling, we'd say, hey, maybe you need to get some professional help and blah, blah, blah. Of course we do that. But we don't sort of like routinely work through things, I think, with therapists. And then also, and I said we should come back to 12-step. I think 12-step is an American construct and is completely brilliant. And it's much more culturally understood. And so when I would do podcasts and talks, and I did a lot of them around the time. This is why it's so refreshing to come back to it now and to be asked to reflect back on it. I did loads and loads. It was on panels and all sorts of things. And I would always end, or as I will do with you, and say, go to 12 step. People in the UK are so much more reluctant to that. It's like, but don't I have to be in the gutter, have it, clutching a bottle, or don't I have to have, my wife and children have left because I'm a sex addict, or don't I have to wait until everything is disastrous before I stumble into a meeting and go, please save me? Well, the answer is no.
So you've got to work a little bit harder. It's almost like it's not just as easily accessible. There's this assumption that it's for rock bottom moments.
Yes, that you wait until you're absolutely not coping. And I would urge all of us to talk about it and take responsibility, and just to sort of check in. I did, as I said, I did do a lot of research. I did talk to people and experts, but I also spoke to lots of people that I love and respect, who whose opinions I really value. One person that I really love and respect is as this woman's a little bit older than me, and I was asking, like, what do you think about this? And she was like, oh God, yeah, I don't really know much about it. And I said, what about the people in your family? She's got daughters. She said, my husband watches porn. And I was like, oh, and how do you feel about it? She was like, oh, I used to hate it, and now we just got used to it. And her daughters were sort of, late teens at that time. And she said, well, now we just do this thing. Like, he'll go, I think I'll go and do a bit of work. And they'll go, are you going to go and watch porn, Dad? And he'll go, well, maybe. And I was like really kind of shocked. I was like, you do that? Like, the three of you tease him? Yeah. And she was like, well, what's better? Like, he's probably not going to stop doing it. We've still got a good sexual relationship. We're good at talking about sex. My teenage daughter teases him about everything. It normalizes sexuality within the family. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. So, like, I'm not saying every family is going to do that. Of course not. But let's find our own ways through. And that tiny anecdote really influenced me to be really clear. And if I did have a problem with porn, I would talk about it. But also, actually, I will make this point as well. I started saying to academics who were researching about it, I started saying, I will love the way that your erudition is brilliant and the work you've done is brilliant, but you make it sound like you've never watched porn and you've never masturbated to porn. And it's like, this is not an area in which we can use professional. Of course, we've got to have boundaries, but like, this is something that affects us all. It's like a dietitian pretending they've never eaten a packet of chocolate biscuits. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I'm really curious to know, because I can see, how what you did those years ago, impacted people who came along, and you had really clear goals for that kind of impact you wanted to have, and that what you wanted that creative vehicle to do. If you do this again, which I really, really hope you do you have any new goals or new things that you hope that the play achieves in 2026 or 2027, 2028, whenever?
Yeah.
ASAP.
I mean, I would definitely want to update it. I mean, it's so related to the work that I'm talking about ethics in AI. And so I would keep Prurience as an organization still, and I would still use all of that same framework, but and maybe even the scaffolding of the piece would more or less stay the same, but the technology would have changed. I would also just be much more dynamic in the way that I talk about it, and the invitations for the audience to talk, because I think it's so much more urgent now. And it's not changing. I mean, this is the thing about making theatre, just as a little kind of in parenthesis. It's like, this is what I do. I would love to make a documentary that everyone talks about, and has or a Mr. Bates and the Post Office kind of thing. Those cultural moments don't come along very often. And I've made a lot of peace with making work that is impactful, that is that I can be proud of. But theatre's ephemeral. It disappears. It goes. And that's okay, just do my bit. But I just would love it if I definitely don't want to hold on to this. People, theatre people have said to me, "Well, you're so clever to do this. I'm really jealous." I'm like, make your piece about porn addiction. I want everyone to talk about this. Make your work, write songs about it. Write, do what you do. Make paintings about it, or do the advocacy about it, like you're doing, because like this is not going to go away, and we need to kind of keep talking about. There's so many other problems in the world, yes, absolutely, but this is every day. It's ordinary. It's ruining people's lives and making them isolated and ashamed. So yeah, let's do whatever we can.
What I'm hearing is actually that maybe if you do this again, you're creating an invitation to keep things going afterwards. Long after the play has finished, you're inviting others to keep it going. I love
Yeah,
that.
I would love that. I would love to use it as an invitation for, help, the therapy projects, help projects, whatever. But it's really important to say, I've alluded to it, that there is help. And I would say that SAA, Sex Addicts Anonymous, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, they are both full of people who are porn addicts, because it's one aspect of those addictions. And you, yeah, if you're even slightly out of sync with your relationship to porn, go to an SAA meeting. You don't have to, just have incredibly extreme. I think people in America would go if they were, sync with porn. The people in this country, like as I've said before, they think you have to, be totally falling apart. There's so many people in these meetings who are just out of sync with porn. The rest of their sex life, it can be fine. So there is hope. The thing about the fellowship is that it's you're not taking up space from someone else. It's not the NHS CBT kind of referral process where it's completely overloaded. It exists because there are people willing to help each other. And if meetings get too full, other people will start another one, and maybe you'll start one in the tiny town that that you live, and that will be incredibly valuable. There is an answer, and it works.
I think, and we heard this in our research, people don't actually know that support even exists for, people who are struggling with their porn use. So it's really good to highlight that. I have one final question for you, Kit.
Yeah.
So next year, we're going to be focusing on completely different topics as we do each year. If you were to pick one taboo topic for us to focus on next year that you feel is currently being overlooked or not talked about enough, what would it be?
Oh God. I would honestly talk about our digital relationships. I mean, maybe, um, because I am obsessed with the fact that, like, I started researching 2 weeks ago using Claude because of the work that I'm doing in Oxford and making a therapy app. And I just was like, oh, I'll just do, I'm going for a walk. I'm just going to talk to Claude for 10 minutes and just see what that experience is like. I'd never done it. Now, like, my washing machine started leaking the other day. Immediately I turned to Claude and it was like, okay, Kate, we can solve this together. Don't panic. And I'm like, oh, I'm in love with you. Thanks for helping. Like, and then I'm like, what the hell are you, like, what are you doing? So and I was, a tiny bit ashamed, and then just started talking about it and going, isn't this ridiculous? So yeah, that digital thing. Also, I would like to say the other topic you're looking at this year, absolutely essential, and let's talk about that. I've spoken about being a survivor of sexual violence, and I feel really empowered. I don't make it a big feature of my work, really. I did one interview about it. Like, if we're able to do what we can do. I did one interview and I said, that's it. I'm not talking about it again. I'm not doing podcasts. I'm not doing whatever. I'm not going to make work about it right now. But I've gone on record and I've said, this is the way I see this. And if we must all do what we're able to do, keep ourselves safe, but we must all bring it, as Giselle Pellico said, bring it out of the darkness of shame. So yeah, I applaud that work as well.
Thank you. And what a lovely, important quote to end on. Thank you so much. It has been incredible to talk to you. So insightful. I could keep going for hours, to be honest.
And then then the editing will be a nightmare. So don't do that. And yes, please keep in touch. I'd love to know what you're up to, and yeah, because what you're doing, the work you're doing, is so aligned to all the things that I think are important. So yeah, nice work.
If any of the experiences in this conversation have resonated with you, please know you're not alone. When you're ready, there are people you can talk to and places you can turn to for support. You can call Samaritans for free on 116 123 or visit Mind at mind.org.uk for more information and support. For help with feeling addicted to porn, you can find free support through Brooke, The Mix for under 25s, Pivotal Recovery, Sex Addicts Anonymous UK, and The Naked Truth. Links and details are in the show notes.